So, Jill, you may not have asked my opinion on this matter, but from my perspective, it's pretty lucky that I'm filming this in late October 2025, because if your credibility regarding disability advocacy was a building, it would be so vacant that you could rent it out as a spirit Halloween. You may not agree with me on that, Jill, but I think we can both agree that disabled people and their friends, family, and professional caregivers all have a lot at stake in regards to the 6th major revision of the DSM, which is currently in progress. Even if you and I aren't in agreement on much of anything, Joe, I can guess that we both have our fingers crossed for a DSM-6 that's reflective of the most up-to-date platinum-tier peer-reviewed science, and that's written for the sake of helping disadvantaged people whose struggles they did not choose for themselves live better lives and be understood without harmful misconceptions, and that every change, addition, and removal made in making this new DSM will be executed with caution, with wisdom, and in good faith, and that this new DSM will be written free of external distorting influences that would make the lives of disabled people more difficult. Even if you and I were to agree on all of that, I do still feel the need to remind you, Jill, that DSM doesn't stand for Disability Stage Mom. The type that sees autistics that aren't their kids as, by existing, doing wrong. Calling them weird and extreme for discussing their fears and dreams. Sees them become writers and shouts, "Oh yeah, my kid can't even read." Says of others, "You aren't disabled, you're privileged and talented," while demanding that their struggles and troubles not be counted. Thinks of statements from autistics not pre-stamped with mom consent as acts of cancellation and silencing against them. Autistics expose prejudice at their own personal risk, and these sorts of moms describe their openness as censorship, saying that autism needs fair and balanced discussion, which means that autistic people themselves can't be trusted. They react to autistic adults asking to be heard with, "Those spoiled kids are stealing our children's defining words." And when told that their target's challenges are clinically confirmed, the moms denounce their being diagnosed as violently absurd. Say that they're sucking up supports that they don't really deserve, when those services might be why they can write or speak with words. Autistics mourn their lost friends just for moms to strike like vultures, accusing misconduct and shouting, "Our kids have it worse." How things got to this point truly defies explanation, but they disclaim disabled people as misrepresentation. Autistic happiness is disparaged as fantasy, and disgust toward those who break the mom's ideals is plain to see. Getting pissy at messages not focused on pity, and at them for daring to be valid in the DSM, which does not stand for Disability Stage Mom, the type that thinks fighting for their kids means causing harm, and speaking out against hope held by autistic adults that kids with difference now won't go through troubles they had known. No one has all the answers, but some live through parts of it on their own, and others ask for help, and when it comes, shout, "Watch your tone." All of this would be dismissed if I, for one, possessed my druthers. When autism moms break bonds sewn by autistic people's mothers. Jill, I'm not against the parents of autistic people fighting for their autistic kids. I'm against you, Jill, using that as an excuse to lie about autistic people other than the autistic kids of NCSA members by misrepresenting the history of disability and presenting the presence of those of us you call high-functioning within academic, scientific, medical, and psychological discussion of autism as an insurgent revisionist debacle concocted so millennials and zoomers on social media can adopt the identity fantasy of being autistic. I'm against you, Jill, abusing your self-assigned position as a leader on matters of neurodevelopmental disability to, based on lies and deception, paint the clinical validity of autistic people like me as an insult and a threat to you and your autistic children, and as an insult and a threat to the parents and autistic children of your organization's supporters. I speak for myself in stating my support for any ground-level NCSA supporter who does not hate and disrespect autistic people other than those most obviously similar to their own autistic children, and who happen to have been aware of the evil actions you and your other NCSA personalities have committed, which I've discussed in the previous installment of my series, and that to my understanding, the true nature of which has gone unnoticed by many, if not all, of your critics and your supporters alike. If you don't believe me on that, Jill, you need to check in this video's description and you'll find a link to an unlisted version of what eventually became part 20 of my series, the previous episode to this one, in which I finally presented for the first time the most severe of my discoveries and concerns regarding your actions as NCSA president in episode 39 of your organization's official podcast, where you, your board member, Lee Wachtel, and your third-party ally, Carmen Lopez Arvizu, defamed the mourning autistic colleagues of an autistic suicide victim by presenting them as having attacked your own autistic children just by appearing in an online news article and discussing their life experiences and concerns. And if you do check that link, Jill, you'll find that I uploaded the 100% complete and ready to go video to YouTube in March of 2025 and simply didn't make it public. If I just wanted to recklessly and carelessly damage the NCSA and any potential for good it may offer to the disability community, back in 2025 March, all I had to do was click a button and make that video and its serious and true contents and concerns public. And then I just would have had to give it a hyperbolic title, attention-grabbing thumbnail, and start circulating it around on neurodiversity social media. And I would have been able to do that just in time for Autism Month. But I didn't. I didn't do that back in April 2025 when I effortlessly could have. You know what did happen instead back in April 2025, Jill? Your NCSA let a bunch of parents and friends of high support needs autistic people, or profoundly autistic people, or however you want to describe them, to Washington, to our capital, to confront lawmakers and demand expansions to services and to escalate societal understanding of autistic people whose lives and safety are, in many cases, directly dependent on systems that are already stretched to their absolute limit and are constantly under threat of being cut on the grounds of not wasting working people's money on autistic people who, according to the heartless, are useless and do nothing to contribute to society. And even though you, Jill, are provably fucked up and bigoted in ways that cause serious harm that you should have to answer for, I would have wanted my video and its legitimate concerns to reach the hands or the eyes and ears of less responsible people and cause the parents and guardians of autistic people who are too busy living their lives alongside their autistic loved ones, people who trusted your group to provide leadership, to suddenly be bombarded with online anger from undisciplined self-advocates who might choose to disobey my constant warnings not to harass or contact NCSA members over this, in the middle of them just trying to appeal to their elected officials over legitimate concerns. I could have executed this entire project as a zero-effort call to arms for armchair warrior slacktivists to bombard you and your NCSA with negativity during Autism Month this year. And I held back on voicing the most serious of my grievances then, and sat on my previous video, part 20 of my project, for over 6 months, during which time it was complete and ready to publicize. And I did that for the sake of avoiding unintended repercussions for your ground level supporters, who I trust had no idea that you and your board member Lee Wachtel did this awful thing, not to mention the other stuff I covered. So if barrier aggression, my video project, was about me trying to silence the voices of the family caregivers of high support needs autistic people, you need to remember that I held back the most serious of my concerns about the NCSA, the most potentially sensationalistic. By keeping that fully finished video I had completed for possible reveal in April and had it uploaded just in time for Autism Month. I could have dropped that during the NCSA's Capitol excursion, and I didn't. Because even though I know I have virtually zero viewership on the internet, I didn't want to risk that one video becoming viral and disrupting something that had the potential to actually do good, no matter how messed up you personally are, Jill. But I'm not going to let you hide behind well-intentioned and clueless, at least up until now, NCSA supporters to let you launder your evil organizing against specific descriptions of autistic people that you've clearly targeted for ridicule and disrespect for daring to be recognized as significantly disabled autistic people within the pages of the DSM. Which, of course, Jill, does not stand for Disability Stage Mom.
What a lovely pin.
Thank you. It's from my district.
They must be very proud of you.
Hi, I'm Super Train Station H, and welcome to the 21st and final part of Barrier Aggression, a series about the National Council on Severe Autism, its part-time anti-autistic propaganda podcast, Autism Confidential, and its evil president, Jill Escher. Pictured here are just a few of the mostly clueless parents who wanted to organize to promote societal empathy for their disabled children. Not pictured is the autistic suicide victim, whose existence Jill Escher concealed from her podcast audience so that she and her NCSA panelists could shamelessly defame their surviving autistic colleagues who were speaking out against anti-autistic societal stigma, which Jill and friends did by accusing them of falsely claiming autism and of censoring and erasing so-called truly autistic people and their parents by sharing their stories in a completely harmless online news article. The scary thing about bullshit like Autism Confidential is that it mixes in hit pieces like episode 39 with what, in my personal opinion, are rather unobjectionable discussions about disability, focusing in on the higher support needs, aka lower functioning end of the spectrum. In fact, episode 52 released at the time I'm filming this in October 2025, and in spite of that episode being dedicated pretty much entirely to the criticism of the neurodiversity movement that the NCSA loves so much, I do mean this in all seriousness. If the NCSA and their guests and allies consistently conducted themselves at the level they do in this episode of their podcast, I would have never made over 24 hours of videos complaining about how awful they are. And I definitely wouldn't be questioning whether or not the NCSA was reasonable for consideration as a possible hate group against autistics they consider high functioning. Now, I sure don't agree with every little thing said in episode 52 of the NCSA's podcast, but I consider it AAA gold standard messaging compared to some of the shit that I've covered in my video series. And it's interesting to note that this happened to be one of the few Autism Confidential episodes not to involve Jill Escher. It's almost like Jill herself could be undermining the intentions of some of the NCSA's other leaders, people who might be too busy trying to help autistic people as best they know how to pay attention to Jill's dogshit bullshit jackass crass antics. If you somehow have not watched my previous 20 videos in this series, all you need to know at this point is that Jill Escher and her dopey duo of podcast sidekicks said a bunch of mean and stupid dumb shit to lie about innocent autistic people and make them look bad for having their clinically verified disability struggles and associated societal challenges discussed in an online news article by Spectrum News, who I believe the NCSA may have some kind of standing personal grudge with, but that's just speculation on my part. I talked about it in, I think, part 18. But you know what? I'm thinking back to the good old days, back in like episode 2 of my project. Back when this was just me nitpicking Jill's irate armchair analysis of a celebrity singer's autism diagnosis. Any of my viewers remember that? Pepperidge fucking Farm remembers.
Pepperidge Farm remembers. They're making raisin bread like Grandma made.
Those were the good old days, because unfortunately now, it's about Jill Escher using the platform of an autism advocacy nonprofit to conceal the death of an autistic suicide victim in an online news article so that she could stoke disrespect among the public about that deceased autistic person's autistic colleagues, because they dared to speak out against prejudice aimed at disabled people working in the medical field, prejudice that Jill insisted never existed, while making herself the personified example of that very prejudice that cost the lives of one of the people discussed in the article that she was bitching about. Jill only read the first 9% of the article and presented it out of context, because if she read even a single sentence further, she would have been forced to discuss how the low support needs, aka high-functioning autistic people described in the article, were facing formally verified clinically significant mental health problems and weren't just happily taking on the identity of autism, as NCSA board member Lee Wachtel so callously put it. Since Jill only read the first 9% of the article, she and her friends made fake complaints of wrongdoing, and that they fell due to Jill's choice to read only the first 9% entirely on the back of Dr. Tahil Javed, the central figure discussed in the interview, a doctor who describes herself as high-functioning and who recounted interactions with autistic peers who said that they felt permanently or internally broken after being diagnosed with ASD. Dr. Javed formed a non-profit organization to promote mental health among disabled people after her autistic support group partner committed suicide and left behind a hopeless suicide note featured in the article. The article that contained that reproduced suicide note from a deceased autistic person was the same article that Jill Escher, president of the National Council on Severe Autism, read the first 9% of before suggesting that the autistic people featured in it be re-diagnosed with personality disorders. Jill went on to support NCSA ally Dr. Carmen Lopez Arvizu as she accused the article of bias and cancellation against autistic people who couldn't attempt careers, and nodded in agreement, Jill did, as NCSA board member Dr. Lee Wachtel compared Dr. Javed and the other autistic people in the article, an article which they repeatedly referred back to, removing any doubt of the primary source of their complaints, to anti-Semitic racists. for appearing in an article that treated their personal fantasy of claiming to be autistic as though it were a legitimate disability. An accusation that spits in the face of Dr. Javed, especially as she was known to have been clinically diagnosed. Now, given the extreme nature of the negative attention Dr. Javed found herself the target of by the NCSA due to her appearing in this article, one can only imagine the intensity of Jill and her NCSA allies' dislike of her, and what the planning session for this podcast might have been like before Jill turned on the mics and cameras and hit record.
A species that shouldn't exist, an offspring from our neglect that is beyond our control. Our entire species has to be eliminated.
Our species, sir?
Now, because of her, they all pose a threat. Because of her, they all think they're invincible. Whatever game you think you're playing, those out there are not playing it with you.
There's a way we can still win.
Well, maybe it didn't go quite like that. To imagine that these three stooges of advocacy put that much thought or planning into this shit-tier bitch-ass hit piece podcast is to give them more credit than they could possibly deserve. But I would certainly say that Jill and her friends treated Dr. Javed and her autistic doctor colleagues like rebel insurgents who, by daring to appear in that article, were threatening to overthrow the NCSA's make-believe dictatorial rule over the disability space and their imaginary ownership over the word autism. Though to be fair to Jill, she is a very important person. She needs to find time not only to run an autism advocacy nonprofit, as well as a self-named philanthropic autism research fund, but she also needs to keep open enough time on her busy schedule to make it onto Twitter and insult her online enemies using disability slurs. With a packed schedule like that, it's perfectly possible that Jill simply could have forgotten the details of the online article she made the basis for her 40-minute discussion about Spectrum News' alleged trivialization of autism. She might have honestly forgot that the article contained both the reproduced termination notice of an autistic doctor that was issued upon discovery of their diagnosis, and the reproduced suicide note of an autistic doctor who lost hope that they would be accepted by the non-disabled world. But given all the important presentations and guest appearances Jill has made, and what she was trusted to be a reliable source on autism and disability, we can't expect her to remember every little detail like that. And by the way, Jill, that reminds me, do you remember that glorified high school assembly you did a presentation at? The one where you said this?
And these aren't just any cases of autism. This isn't TikTok autism. You have to have a developmental disability to qualify for services in this system.
TikTok autism, huh? Well, best case scenario for Jill, in my reckoning, is that clip had her seriously bending the context of disability terms unique to the specific California State Disability Services System she was discussing, and did that to incorrectly present relatively higher functioning autistic people as instead not even being neurodevelopmentally disabled at all. Well, Jill, whether you personally feel that people you claim to have TikTok autism are actually autistic or not, you need to realize that clinically diagnosed disabled people within that exact range of characteristics, including people that you consider high-functioning autistic friends and allies of the NCSA, are losing their lives because they feel like they will never have their struggles or their strengths accepted by non-disabled people. People exactly like you, who spread messages that encourage the public to disrespect them in the name of promoting what you've branded as authentic awareness about autism. Well, Jill, I hope you felt big and important on the stage of that literal high school assembly that cut a check to have the TEDx branding slapped onto it like gold spray paint onto a pile of shit.
Now, there's an old saying, if you tell a lie that's big enough and you tell a lie often enough, eventually people will come to believe it.
Ironically, you received a very supportive YouTube comment on that presentation of yours, Jill, by someone who applauded you for, in their words, not sweetening the subject of autism. This person's only criticism of your speech was that you didn't address the ugly and overlooked reality of increased suicide rates among autistic people. Well, Jill, you had an opportunity to address suicide rates among autistic people when you chose to discuss this Spectrum News article on your podcast, since the article discussed elevated suicide statistics among autistic people and included the reproduced suicide note of a deceased autistic person. But for some reason, you chose not to discuss that, and instead read the first 9% of that article out of context and then complained about how awful the autistic people in the article were for daring to be discussed in the article to begin with, and complaining, based on nothing, that they didn't actually have the severe communication impairments they were professionally documented as having. You and your friends expressed outspoken disapproval of these people for being diagnosed with autism, along with your extensive dismissals of the notion that they have legitimate clinical impairments, and your repeated rejections of the notion that they could be justified in speaking about those challenges because your own children don't speak at all.
They ran this article. Doctors with autism speak out against stigma. All right, so never mind the fact that neither of my children even understand what a doctor is. But, these doctors with autism, you've had long careers in medicine. How many doctors have you met who you would diagnose with autism?
None. The one in, what was that, Grey's Anatomy? There was one.
The one on TV.
Yeah.
The TV doctor, right, who doesn't exist in real life, less. So this is what Spectrum News considers to be autism. This is, and we just heard it, sensory overload, communication, and difficulty expressing emotions. Okay, that describes a lot of people I know who don't have autism. So there are those quote unquote autistic doctors. Of course, I don't see a speck of autism in these people, but whatever. Who have been antagonistic towards those who speak out on behalf of the severely affected, kind of saying that we're not treating them with dignity, we're not treating them with respect, we're disparaging them, when all we're doing is communicating their reality. Like, it's inherently awful. Like, their existence is inherently awful to these people. Anyway, I won't elaborate on that too much, but what about another diagnosis for, these people who are so super functional, so super successful? They don't really have, severe social communication problems, because here they are, they're able to, express very complicated thoughts. And what about another diagnosis? I mean, is there anything in the DSM? I mean, you guys are members of the APA, right? The American Psychiatric Association. I mean, is there anything in the book that could be applied instead of autism, some kind of personality disorder?
When considering that you and your board member and your non-member ally did all of that, I find it within my right to personally speculate as to whether or not you, Jill, even cared that one of the autistic doctors discussed in the Spectrum News article actually fucking killed themselves. I could personally speculate, Jill, that if you in fact did not care that one of these autistic doctors fucking killed themselves, that it might have been because you saw the people in that article as self-important show-stealing assholes who were whining about nothing and pretending to be disabled as they stole attention and sympathy from your kids. But in spite of my vaunted autistic superpowers, I can't read your mind, Jill, to know what you were thinking about the people in that article, or if you did care that one of them fucking killed themselves. If, Jill, you did care that this article discussed an autistic doctor who fucking killed themselves, that is, tragically lost their life to an act of suicide that might have been averted if this person had better supports in place for them and was more accepted by the non-disabled world. Supports which this article that you called extreme and weird was advocating for.
So I think we're going to talk about like just an example of how extreme and weird they ran this article. Doctors with autism speak out against stigma.
I would have to say, Jill, if you did actually care about these people, your decision to only read the first 9% of the article that discussed them, and then refuse to discuss these facts yourself, and then complained for 40 minutes that this deceased autistic person's friends were speaking out against the societal stigma that caused the calamity of this person's loss. This person who you didn't even mention existed. Well, I may have clinically verified impairments in understanding people like normal people would, but I think that's a pretty strange way of showing care for someone's life and death. So Jill, do you think the YouTube commenter who applauded your TEDx talk, your alleged reality check on autism, but who wanted you to also address suicide among autistic people, would still applaud you, knowing that you and your doctor friends used an article that discussed a clinically diagnosed autistic person forming a charity in honor of her autistic colleague who committed suicide as an opportunity to falsely complain about that same person for allegedly incorrectly self-adopting disability terminology as part of a fantasy fetish, as Lee Wachtel put it, that did a disservice to who Lee calls true autistic people. Do you think they would be pleased with you, Jill?
Now, there's an old saying. If you tell a lie that's big enough and you tell a lie often enough, eventually people will come to believe it.
Well, I can't imagine a better lie than one where the liar doesn't need to say anything, where they instead choose not to say something important that paints a completely different picture of the topic being discussed. So Jill, I can't know whether or not you're happy that Dr. Javed's friend committed suicide, but I do know that whether you were happy about it or not, you certainly had no problem laughing and joking at the people featured in the article, while you failed to mention that Dr. Javed's deceased autistic support group partner existed at all. I also know, Jill, that you had a great time being invited as a headline speaker at the 2025 Autism Society San Diego Social and Mental Health Conference back in February. There you are, Jill. I watched your presentation there, and it's really funny how you stopped using derogatory phrases like TikTok autism and refrained from directly attacking the clinical validity of low support needs autistic people when you're in an audience of people who you could reasonably expect wouldn't tolerate you using this platform to denounce and ridicule autistic people other than your children. So, Jill, do you think the Autism Society San Diego Social and Mental Health Conference would have invited you to speak at their event if they knew that you used your National Council on Severe Autism to mock the autistic colleagues of an autistic suicide victim because you were pissed that these clinically diagnosed autistic people were featured in an article to raise awareness of life-threatening mental health disasters that were affecting high-functioning autistic people who, according to you, Jill, are benefiting from a violent absurdity against your autistic children just by their being diagnosed with autism at all?
The social quirks
are in the same category, the same diagnostic category as my kids.
And that's a problem.
It's absurd. It's not just a problem. I mean, it's violently absurd. It's radically absurd.
Well, if the Autism Society San Diego cares, they can decide that for themselves, especially since you, Jill, have previously established and ongoing history with them. Whether they invite you back or not is their business. And regardless of how they treat you going forward, Jill, it's time for you to realize that your time as even an arguably positive and presentable presence within the disability advocacy scene is in critical jeopardy. Speaking for myself and myself only, I would say that your personal decision not to use the NCSA to promote the neurodiversity paradigm is not the basis for the jeopardy that you've led yourself and the NCSA into. The problem, Jill, is that you either hate autistic people who you call high functioning, or you have some kind of problem where, without realizing it, you do an amazingly convincingly job of accidentally doing things that happen to coincide precisely with the actions of someone who hates high-functioning autistic people and who encourages that hate as an important element of your advocacy for those who your bum-faced chum Lee Wachtel, who for some reason works in a children's disability hospital, calls truly autistic.
It's become almost, sadly, almost like faddish for individuals who have the types of challenges that are described in that article to adopt the term of, to identify as being autistic. And I think that in sharp contrast to many patients with autism, particularly the ones that Dr. Lopez and I work with, autism had taken on kind of this character of almost like a fantasy, a gift, it's special to be this way. And, you bring something special and unique to the world that other people don't have. And it's become kind of cool and interesting to be neurodivergent. And it seems that a lot of people, rather than perhaps looking more deeply at the crux of the issues that they're experiencing, have happily taken on this moniker of autism as something that explains the challenges that they feel that they have, and that they can also pawn off as a very positive thing. And that does do a disservice to those who have, I guess, more classic or more true forms of autism.
Hey kid, you're a stupid little fucker.
Jill, our stories, our strengths, our weaknesses, our triumphs, our failures, our lives, and our deaths are not yours to selectively pick and choose from as building pieces for you to frame a monolithic portrait of autism in which only certain of us, blessed with your preference and permission, are allowed to be seen or heard. Especially when you not only aren't autistic, Jill, but you aren't even a fucking doctor, both of which are indisputable facts. So Jill, I ask you, what would you have done if this article was titled, "Doctors with Autism Speak Out Against Stigma Following Colleague Suicide"? Would you have merely scribbled out the last 3 of those words and still proceeded to take this article about a clinically diagnosed autistic person founding a not-for-profit organization to prevent even more of her disabled friends from dying, and distort it so as to present it as an absurd hit piece that spread bias against your children? What if, Jill, instead of a stock image of doctors at an office meeting, the article instead used a photo of Dr. Javed attending her friend's funeral? What then, Jill? Would you have cropped the casket out of the picture so that you and your 2 hench doctors from Kennedy Krieger could laugh at Dr. Javed for irrationally crying about nothing? Jill, if you had personally went to the cemetery where Dr. Javed's colleague was laid to rest and actually pulled down your pants and pissed on this deceased autistic person's grave. However ghoulishly disrespectful that would have been, it would have at least acknowledged that this person actually lived and died. But no, what you did is so much more vividly resentful than that. Because, Jill, you concealed the fact that this person ever existed in the first place, and then held Spectrum News in contempt for running an article that implied that the lives of people of that description were actually valuable and worth saving, as your jealous hatred for disabled people that are able to attempt things that you say your own children cannot is that boundless in its inhumane intensity. And yes, Jill, I say jealous, because you have stated in public already, in pieces that you're quite proud of yourself, that you would consider your own 2 autistic children to be completely cured and non-disabled if they were diagnosed within the range of what some may call high-functioning autism, which is the most unhinged and resentful and disrespectful thing you could possibly fool yourself into thinking is a good thing to say. And yes, Jill, I say hatred, because in my personal opinion, your decision to take this specific article and hold a 40-minute public complaint session that's centered on it demonstrates hatred. In my personal opinion, the fact that you concealed the death of an autistic suicide victim who took their life out of despair caused by rejection by non-disabled people, also that you could feign validity in making fun of that deceased autistic person's clinically diagnosed autistic friends and colleagues, demonstrates hatred. In my opinion, the fact that you and your friends ridiculed specifically named autistic people, clinically diagnosed in this case, for, as you and your friends put it, claiming to be autistic and adopting the identity of autism, demonstrates hatred. In my opinion, holding these specifically named disabled people in contempt for pursuing medical careers and attending university demonstrates hatred. If all of that, in your personal opinion, Jill, does not reflect some form of hatred, I'd be afraid to think of what possibly could. Because you, Jill, may not have committed violence against these people, but you have accused these people's mere status as diagnosed autistic people of being a violent absurdity against your children, a message which you yourself filmed and then published under your organization's banner as part of what you think of as autism advocacy.
But yeah, I mean, I think this has been one of the great debacles of autism, right? That, you know, people who are cognitively, have strong cognitive abilities, strong communication abilities, strong adaptive abilities, but have kind of social quirks, are in the same category, the same diagnostic category as my kids who are nonverbal and function like at a preschool level.
And
like,
that's a problem.
It's absurd. It's not just a problem. I mean, it's violently absurd. It's radically absurd.
Have you stopped to consider, Jill, how non-disabled people in the outside world, people outside of your direct control, will want to treat people like us after hearing you, as the president of a self-proclaimed National Autism Council, accuse our mere status of being autistic to constitute a violent radical absurdity against your defenseless autistic children? Jill, you used your advocacy platform to say that the ability for high-functioning autistic people to be clinically diagnosed constituted violence. And now, by some weird coincidence, we now have the mothers of low-functioning autistic people who retweet messages from you and from your NCSA, also taking the initiative to go around literally accusing high-functioning autistic self-advocates of being directly responsible, of having blood on our hands over the murders of autistic children who were murdered by their parents and by law enforcement. Killings supposedly provoked by the fact that we, simply by receiving disability resources appropriate for our disabilities, resources that in many cases are the reason that we appear to you to be too normal to dare to call ourselves disabled, had stolen these services from the defenseless autistic children that were murdered, making us somehow the ones to blame when their parents and the police kill them.
I don't see a problem with some people identifying their differences or letting themselves neurodivergent. It's fine. We all have our little quirks and our little differences, and that's fine. However, the use of the word autism, it's taken to the extremes because we need it for policymaking, for accessing services, for accessing education, and changing, presenting this as some neurodivergence. That is such a simplistic way of represent what we see. There's so many of the people we serve that will never be able to even understand what a word doctor is. So that is what the conversation should be about. If we're going to define this, or if it's defined as a spectrum, then allow the middle of the spectrum to move and allow the both extremes and the ones that are in the middle to be able to have a voice as well. Do not dominate the conversation, because that is what bias is. And that's something that we don't talk about enough in this kind of articles like the Spectrum publishes. It is the bias. You are absolutely writing all these documents with the bias that autism is something that is just a difference. And that is not what we see in the population we serve. And very often I tell the parents of many of my patients, I do not know how it is to live the life you live, because I don't know. I have a semblance of an idea, but I'm not the one taking care of your child 24/7. I'm not the one that is terrified that maybe, somebody's going to get out of the house and walk across the freeway, or worse, be arrested or shot because somebody thinks they're on drugs and trying to rob me. So there's no way, even though I take care of these families and these patients, there is no way I can speak for them because I do not live the way they do. So this bias and this extremism on both sides of the spectrum has to stop to really be of service for the population that we serve.
Holy shit!
Are you serious?
Jill? Somehow, I actually don't hate you. But I need to ask you, why would you say that the ability for high-functioning autistic people to be clinically diagnosed with autism was an act of violence against your children if you did not expect your audience to start taking those messages seriously? Whether you stop to consider the effects of you saying those things or not, the implications of either possibility, whether you thought through it or not, to our lives and our safety, are too ugly for me to feel like talking about now. but in my opinion, it still reflects hatred. But I admit that I don't know you, Jill. Perhaps I just don't understand you. Perhaps I'm jumping to conclusions and being judgmental. Perhaps this behavior of yours is not hatred. Perhaps when you, Jill Escher, as president of an autism advocacy nonprofit, conceal the deaths of autistic people in news articles so that you can gather your friends to mock their surviving autistic colleagues, is your way of showing respect. And perhaps I'm just extreme and weird for finding that disturbing. If that is how you choose to show affection and care, Jill, I'd also have to guess that you had no brain inside your head, and that your skull contained a filthy rag soused in the musty, pestilential ooze of a mosquito-spawned mud puddle. Jill, if it were true that you have nothing but soggy cotton and maggot-infested ditchwater to do your thinking with, I will need to explain to you, again, that the scenario you've created for yourself and the National Council on Severe Autism is terrible to the point of verging into actual fantasy, because I still can barely believe this is real and wish it was not. For as long as I've known the truth about your podcast episode, I have, night after night, dreamed that none of this was real and was relieved to have discovered this, only to wake up and be disappointed. Which means that part of me, on a subconscious level, literally cannot believe that you abused your position as president of the National Council on Severe Autism to ridicule and disparage the autistic friends of an autistic suicide victim, people who were speaking out about mental health disasters faced by high-functioning disabled people, people who, according to you, sneaky little Jill, were being extreme and weird for doing so in an online newspaper about neurodevelopmental disability. What a shame it is, Jill, that in your acting as a disability stage mom, that in your obsessive crusade to make your own children the center stage main characters of autism, you reduce them to side characters in your disgraceful shit show, in which you've painted an autistic suicide victim out of the picture so that you could accuse their mourning autistic friends and colleagues of conspiring to erase the plight of your kids, your autistic kids, whose struggles you've perverted into an undirected weapon to wield against the autistic community in a vengeful campaign against autistic strangers who you, as a non-autistic person, denounce as the exploiters of privilege. Privilege in the form of things that non-disabled people don't have to ask anyone for fucking permission for. While your National Council on Severe Autism solicits tax-free charitable donations so that you can help autistic people, only for you to instead use those resources to, in my opinion, conduct the National Council on Severe Autism as a witch-hunting society that casts knowingly false accusations of misconduct against innocent autistic people and champions messages that serve in making the lives of autistic people short, nasty, and miserable. And doing all of that while hiding behind not only your own autistic children, who you describe as being unable to process these concepts cognitively, but also hiding behind the parents of autistic children who came to your group because they wanted nothing more than to have a credible society to organize behind to ensure better futures for their kids. Fuck you, Jill Escher. Fuck you. And the fucking disturbing part about this, to me, is that I've yet to discuss why I myself am personally offended by you and what you've done. It's a reason that's entirely my own fault. But in spite of that, yes, I am personally offended by you, Jill, in regards to this matter, for reasons I will not discuss in this project. But as I said before, I'll keep the reason I'm personally offended by you and the reason I went out of my way to seek out and listen to episode 39 of your podcast a secret for myself for the time being. And should your actions obligate me to divulge that secret, it will be a bad day for the both of us, which I hope never comes to pass. Please know, all watching this, that I am still 100% serious that no one without previously established interactions or relations with the National Council on Severe Autism should contact Jill or any NCSA member or supporter in regards to this. Anyone who wishes to support my intentions in making these videos should spread the word about what Jill and the NCSA have done, and aside from that, ignore them completely. Period. Well, that was unpleasant. I'm about ready to wrap this up, but first, I feel like we need to lighten the mood a bit. If only there were some crude and vulgar dunce rogue sonofabricates masquerading as autism advocates that I could go off on. Oh, wait.
Welcome to the fantasy zone. Get ready.
Okay, open the door and let's take a swing at the motherfuckers.
What about another diagnosis for, these people who are so super functional, so super successful?
How successful can someone be in a fucking casket, Jill? I know you never actually said that, but that's only because you lied in the first place by only reading the first 9% of the article you're reacting to.
What about another diagnosis for, these people who are so super functional, so super successful? They don't really have, severe social communication problems because here they are. They're able to, express very complicated thoughts. And
is successfully assessing which bridge to jump off of a complicated thought to you, Jill? Could someone get a fucking Mensa medal for that? Do they pin it to their body bag? Go discuss that with your NCSA board members, Jill. You're a piece of shit who hides behind your disabled children like a little bitch.
Right? They have an immense capacity for abstract thinking, right? And what about another diagnosis?
Capacity for abstract thinking, huh? Hey, Jill, is tying a fucking noose correctly and determining the correct length of rope to use your idea of abstract thinking that would disqualify someone from receiving a diagnosis for autism? A diagnosis which describes the least adversely impacted people as having a documented elevated risk of suicide. Jill, why did you read that article and hide the radically elevated suicide statistics for high-functioning autistic people from your audience? Why did you want your audience to hate people that you know are facing lethal peril of self-harm, Jill?
I'm curious, you guys, you've had long careers in medicine. How many doctors have you met who you would diagnose with autism?
None.
The one in, what was that, Grey's Anatomy? There was one.
Oh, the one on TV.
Yeah.
The TV doctor, right, who doesn't exist in real life.
Wow, it's hard for autistic doctors to exist long enough to meet your two lackeys when they're fucking dead, Jill, you laughing, joking dumbass. It's not like I dug up this information from a different article about Dr. Javed, and I'm holding you to account for things you couldn't have possibly known based on only the one article you happen to have covered. This is literally the contents of the article you're specifically complaining about, an article that you lied for 40 fucking minutes about by only reading the first 9% of it before distorting it into a hate piece against your children. Why should anyone trust anything you have to say about autism, let alone trust the public policy to be in your hands that your organization is trying to push into laws that will impact the lives and rights of autistic people?
I don't see a problem with some people identifying their differences or letting themselves neurodivergent. It's fine. We all have our little quirks and our little differences, and that's fine. However, the use of the word autism, it's taken to the extremes because we need it for policymaking, for accessing services, for accessing education.
So, is access to a fucking morgue one of those services, Carmen? Because Dr. Javed's friend and support group partner sure needed one. And here you are defaming Dr. Javed for daring to talk about why something's wrong about this. Who the fuck do you think you're protecting with this bullshit? I'd rather trust Team Rocket to protect Ash Ketchum's Pikachu than trust the National Council on Severe Autism and its present state to protect autistic people. In fact, I'd rather trust Team Rocket to kidnap Ash Ketchum's Pikachu than trust you clowns to help autistic people. I'm not sure which would leave me more disappointed.
It's become sadly almost like faddish for individuals who have the types of challenges that are described in that article to adopt the term of, to identify as being autistic. And I think that in sharp contrast to many patients with autism, particularly the ones that Dr. Lopez and I work with, autism had taken on kind of this character of almost like a fantasy, a gift, it's special to be this way.
Hey Lee, do you think Dr. Javed from the article you're responding to felt like she was in a fucking fantasy when she read her friend's suicide note, which was also in the article that you're responding to, that you chose not to discuss with your audience? I'd rather trust Thanos with the fucking Infinity Stones than trust you to advocate for autistic people.
Autism had taken on kind of this character of almost like a fantasy, a gift, it's special to be this way, and you bring something special and unique to the world that other people don't have, and it's become kind of cool and interesting to be neurodivergent. And it seems that a lot of people, rather than perhaps looking more deeply at the crux of the issues that they're experiencing, have happily taken on this moniker of autism.
Look more deeply? Is 6 feet into a fucking burial plot deep enough for you, Lee? Fuck you, Lee. How the fuck do you work in a hospital for disabled children? These people literally went to get professional help for their problems, and the direct result is you accusing them of happily assuming neurodevelopmental disability labels as part of an identity fantasy and a fetish. Kiss my ass.
It seems that a lot of people, rather than perhaps looking more deeply at the crux of the issues that they're experiencing, have happily taken on this moniker of autism as something that explains the challenges that they feel that they have, and that they can also pawn off as a very positive thing, because now the current trend is all autism should be embraced and experienced and celebrated as a gift. And so you can turn what your struggles were into something that you can claim that people should celebrate. And I think it gives people kind of a lot of an out in a way.
Giving them an out? The only out you need is out the fucking door.
And so you can turn what your struggles were into something that you can claim that people should celebrate. And I think it gives people kind of a lot of an out in a way to take on this term and erase any type of negativity or association of a challenge. And that does do a disservice to those who have, I guess, more classic or more true forms of autism.
Erasing negativity and challenges? Lee, you helped sneaky little Jill erase the suicide of an autistic doctor so that you could mock and denounce that deceased autistic doctor's friends for saying that their lives should be saved and not discarded.
And they're also able to achieve so many more things. I mean, just thinking about somebody who's been through medical school, that means that they succeeded at a very high level throughout their secondary education. They succeeded at a high level in college, and then they went on to medical school. They completed a residency. They functioned and succeeded at an extremely high level. And I don't really have a problem so far. I mean, anybody can call himself whatever he wants. I mean, at the end of the day, that's their business.
You're absolutely right, Lee. At the end of the day, it is their business. But at high noon, you sat down to film this bullshit podcast.
And I don't really have a problem so far. I mean, anybody can call himself whatever he wants. I mean, at the end of the day, that's their business. But the issue really becomes then when people have adopted this term, and for some reason people who have adopted the term, the identity as autism, take great offense at the idea that some people who are classified also as having autism cannot do the things that they can do. They cannot make any type of decisions. Maybe they can choose between having a vanilla and a strawberry ice cream. They can't live independently. They're never going to be able to do any of those things that these other individuals, like physicians who claim they have autism, can do.
Lee, you know for a fucking fact that no one in this article adopted shit, especially not in the 9% you and your cronies chose to read out of context. The only person taking offense to specific profiles of neurodevelopmental disability here is you and your panelist friends. Who the fuck do you think you're protecting with this shit, Lee? It certainly isn't autistic people. I'd rather trust Shar Aznable, son of Zeonzoom Daikun, to protect the Earth from meteors in the year Universal Century 0093 than trust the National Council on Severe Autism to protect autistic people.
You know, well, the people with high-functioning autism, like those individuals in many of those articles, don't want autism to be in the DSM. That's like one of the goals of some of these advocates, is that should be removed from the DSM.
No one in this article said that, Lee. Your complaints are not fucking real.
What you're saying isn't real.
So if they don't want it to be seen as a disorder, well, great, pick another term for it and, like, you know, go on your merry way.
Go on your merry way? For Dr. Javed's friend, that merry way was straight into a merry fucking casket. Lee, I'm done fucking talking about you, and especially about your self-defeating, desperate claims not to be bothered by the existence of high-functioning autistic people working in the medical field, as you complained about them for 40 fucking minutes about things that the people in the article you kept referring to never fucking said, including accusations of comparisons to anti-Semitism.
To prevail. I think that we're stuck in the United States with like skewing reality for a lot of fantasy on many levels, and at some point that like needs to stop. Particularly when it comes to, you know, it's just the whole thing of like fighting for equality and equity and like equal rights for everybody. It's like I always say, you cannot fight for like you know, racial equity and like spout anti-Semitism at the same time. That's incongruous, and if you act like that, you're just a hypocrite.
No one fucking held you up at gunpoint and forced you to use this article to make these claims, because all you had to do was go on Tumblr or TikTok for 5 fucking minutes and cherry pick through the actually autistic hashtag for someone saying dumb, unvetted, random bullshit about autism with no basis in reality. And if you had done that, I'd have nothing to say about a lot of the complaints you made. Instead, you chose to attach these complaints to the story of an autistic doctor founding a charity in memory of our autistic friend who lost their life to suicide.
So if they don't want it to be seen as a disorder, well, great, pick another term for it and, like, you know, go on your merry way.
Merry fuck yourself, Lee. Merry fucking shitsmas.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Autism Confidential, the podcast from the National Council on Severe Autism. I'm your host, Jill Escher, the president of NCSA.
Hey, sneaky little Jill. This is none of your fucking business, but I can't help but inform you that I was one of the first people to be diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome upon that listing becoming available. That former DSM category was practically made specifically for me, so I have zero emotional or ideological attachments to the DSM-5 diagnostic instruction of the autism spectrum, and I was not pleased upon the release of the DSM-5, specifically because I was concerned about my relatively minimal support needs being misunderstood as suitable for disabled friends of mine who needed more help than I could possibly ever make use of. After the DSM-5 came out, it took me hours of reading and research that I engaged in for years before I personally felt okay acquiescing to the restructuring of the autism spectrum range of developmental disorders and calling myself autistic. And throughout that entire time, I had zero grudge toward disabled people who would use the newly current diagnostic terminology for themselves who happened not to have had the word autism in their formal diagnosis before that. In fact, one of the main reasons I eventually accepted the new terminology for myself was because I came to the realization that I had developed a foundational sense of identity within the nomenclature of my diagnosis that I was emotionally attached to in an unproductive way, in a way that contradicted the ideology that these diagnostic manuals and definitions are based on the latest science and not on tradition and dogma. Which is ironic, considering that you, Jill, and other NCSA personalities and supporters accuse ASD1 autistics, who identify themselves as autistic today, of doing so based on an emotional, elective, identity-driven, ulterior motive to assume a politically contextualized identity fantasy. I, of all people, am fully aware that it's possible to argue that autism disorder and Asperger's syndrome should have been kept as separate diagnoses, even if Asperger's syndrome at the very least needed a name change, and that you could make those arguments without being an evil dumbass about it and targeting end-level patients and disabled people about it. I'm aware that it's possible to choose not to unilaterally embrace the neurodiversity paradigm without being an outrageous shit stain about it. But you rejected those reasonable options in this podcast episode and instead dedicated yourself and your organization to an actual desecration against autistic people organizing in memory of their deceased autistic colleague, a desecration which you should never be forgotten for having carried out using an advocacy nonprofit. Why should anyone trust your NCSA, Jill, to be looking out for high support needs, aka lower functioning autistic people, when you and certain of your board members have proven that they consider low support needs, aka higher functioning autistic people, discussing life-threatening mental health crises faced by people in our range of clinically validated disability, to therefore be a biased act of cancel culture against helpless autistic children, who we supposedly are disgusted by the very mention of. Jill, this is just my personal advice, but I think you ought to give the seat to the NCSA of presidency to someone who's at least vaguely able to convincingly impersonate not being obviously evil. I won't state any specific names because I don't want you to have some kind of weird jealous ass attack and start targeting them and kicking them out the NCSA because someone like me prefers them to run the organization over you. But you may have noticed there are a large number of public-facing NCSA personalities that I've either never mentioned even once, or have only mentioned in the context of really not having that big a problem with them, and if I did, it's a problem that I could actually have a normal conversation about them with. But what you did is beyond the ability to be called normal or acceptable. If you want to do this kind of bullshit, Jill, you need to quit the NCSA and go found a hate group if you want to do this shit. And the best part? You don't have to change a thing about how you're acting. Just stop pretending to want to spread genuine awareness about lower functioning autism, as you call it, only to accuse high functioning autistic people of being a conspiratorial cabal that's wrongfully seizing control of the media and of government councils to cheat and steal from your children to make the lives of truly autistic people miserable. Because that kind of shit is what hate groups do, Jill. You could even give it a name like Americans Against High Functioning Autism. And with you in charge, I can only assume that it would be a lot more successful than the National Council on Severe Autism has been in helping lower functioning autistic people. Now, I know that running an actual successful group might seem scary to you, since you're so comfortable in your present state of disgrace, like how blood-sucking barnflies are comfortable with hot, juicy horse diarrhea, but it's a good thing for you that the Spectrum News article decided to be titled Doctors with Autism Speak Out Against Stigma, because that happens to be a title that you could work with and bend to distort into your agenda that you wanted for your podcast episode. Because once again, if that Spectrum News article was accurately titled Doctors with Autism Speak Out Against Stigma Following Colleague Suicide, you wouldn't have been able to get as far with the narrative you wanted to put around your piece. Even if you still only read the first 9% of the article as you did in your podcast, like a sensational fucking coward. So one final time, Jill, fuck you. Go spend time with your children, or do whatever you want, but get the fuck out of the autism community. Well, at this point, I've said everything I could possibly think to say on this subject, at least in the context of the Barrier Aggression series. So to sum this all up one final time, based on the detailed evidence I've presented and explained over the last 21 videos, spanning the course of around 24 hours, my personal opinion is that I don't think you should trust Jill Escher about disability, because I hope that I've proven that she's disrespected autistic people with relatively lower support needs, and I think that it's a shame that well-intended members of the public have financially endowed Jill and her organization to help their autistic friends and family members, only for Jill to use that platform to literally laugh out loud on camera at actual autistic patients and present that as autism advocacy. I also personally find it silly that Jill, in spite of not being a doctor, has published serialized messages minimalizing and dismissing the struggles of relatively higher functioning autistic people by making statements so extreme that she not only rejects their officially recognized status of being neurodevelopmentally disabled, but also calls the mere fact of them being clinically diagnosed in the first place to be a violent absurdity committed against her own autistic children. Given that Jill's group seeks to educate the public about autism, specifically about subpopulations of extremely vulnerable and overlooked people, even among autistics, Jill's decision to describe the mere existence of innocent people's presence in the same broad semantic space of disability as her own children as a violent absurdity is recklessly irresponsible of her at best, and attitudes of that nature have already been used to justify targeted harassment and mistreatment of autistic people of all support needs levels, including accusations of us being responsible for the murder of autistic children by their parents and by law enforcement. Then, Jill does weird things, like call people disability slurs, such as the R word on social media, which isn't the sort of behavior I'd expect from a credible and responsible person tasked with dispersing charitably donated money to help disabled people. I've based these opinions of mine not upon any exclusive source or privileged information, but upon Jill's own podcast series, which she intentionally recorded and published with the presumed expectation that the recordings in some way or another would aid in the progress of the NCSA and its objectives and goals. I also sourced these concerns from Jill's personal Twitter account. I can't say how long the original evidence of this may remain online, given the concerns that their content is raised upon closer examination. But what I do know is that I have extremely limited interest in further discussing these issues, at least in the form that I have in this series. I wish everyone I've discussed a peaceful and blessed life going forward, including Jill Escher, who in spite of all of this, I hope will spend a long and peaceful life with her family. Even if they are other people and organizations I'd rather trust my money to than Jill or the NCSA. In conclusion, I would hope that anyone watching that whistle means it's time for everyone who's still mad at Jill Escher to release the tension with a sing-along so we can have fun and spread the word in a jovial and constructive manner. Let's do it. Don't trust Jill Escher about disability. She's disrespected those with lower support needs, endowed by the public to help their autistic friends. patients, only for her to laugh out loud at actual patients. Jill Escher sure isn't anyone's doctor, but that fact doesn't stop her from publishing discouraging works. Targeting autistic people whose diagnosis she calls violently absurd. What a dangerous choice of words. As for my sources, it's funny that you should ask. Everything that I mentioned is from Jill's podcast and her Twitter. Somehow I doubt the evidence will stay up long, but I'd rather give my money to a son. I would rather donate to a son. Mine so long. There, if you're mad at Jill Escher for what she did, sing the silly cartoon dog song instead of contacting her or anyone from the NCSA. I hope that Jill has a long and fantastic life with her family, but I will never trust her again in regards to disability activism. And I hope that the NCSA either fundamentally reinvents itself not to be messed up or just goes away. But that's for the NCSA's members and stakeholders to decide for themselves. That being said, I'm done with this project. All 24 hours or so of this video series are dedicated to Mark Rosen, because I can assure you, if he wasn't busy chasing a Mr. Softy truck in heaven, that he'd have had twice as much to say about this mess as I did. Additionally, I've raised money for a water buffalo via Heifer International in Mark's honor. I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.